Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're looking into something we found pretty fascinating, and we're calling it the resignation paradox. You sent over some articles on this, and wow, it really does make you think about politics in a whole new way, like some kind of high-stakes chess game.
It's all about strategy for sure, and resignation is one of the most interesting moves a politician can make.
Yeah, you're right. Like, you think resignation means you're stepping down, losing power,
Yeah.
but it can actually be the complete opposite.
Right.
It can be like a strategic retreat,
Yeah.
or even, like you said, a power play. So Matt Gaetz is a great example of this. He resigns from Congress. Everyone was thinking he's going to be the next attorney general,
Right.
and then, bam, he withdraws his nomination. It's like something straight out of House of Cards.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of the paradox. You'd think resigning means weakening your position, but sometimes it's the opposite, a calculated move for even more power.
Okay, so let's break this down, because on the surface, it just doesn't make sense. Why would anyone resign when they're at the top of their game?
Well, because sometimes to get to that next level of power, you have to take a step back. It's like sacrificing a pawn in chess to gain control of the whole board. And that's where ambition comes in. Politicians are by nature ambitious, always looking to climb higher, and sometimes the way up is by resigning.
Oh, okay, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
But Getz's story is still playing out, so it's hard to know where it fits into all of this. Do you have other examples?
Oh, we've got tons. History's full of these head-scratching resignations that make total sense once you see the bigger picture. Take Judd Gregg, for example. Back in 2009, he was a senator, wanted to be Commerce Secretary under Obama, so he resigned.
Sounds like a logical career move.
Exactly. But then he totally changed his mind, withdrew his acceptance.
Whoa, hold on. What happened there? Seemed like a done deal.
Well, it just shows how risky these strategic resignations can be. Greg probably thought he was on the same page as Obama, but when he got closer, realized they had very different ideas.
So resignation is a gamble.
Hmm.
Big rewards, but you could lose it all.
You got it. And Greg's case is a good example because it wasn't about scandal or anything. It was purely political calculation, and deciding the risk wasn't worth it.
Okay, so we've got ambition as one piece of this puzzle. What else is going on? What other reasons are there for these paradoxical resignations?
Well, sometimes it's not about climbing higher. It's about damage control, protecting yourself from a scandal. And those situations can get pretty intense. Remember Larry Craig back in 2007?
Oh yeah, the airport bathroom situation.
Yeah.
Definitely not a highlight in political history.
Exactly. He was arrested for lewd conduct, and the backlash was immediate. He resigned, trying to contain the damage. But then,
Didn't he try to take it back?
oh yeah, he did. It was almost funny. Wait, no, I didn't mean it. But once that resignation is out there, it's like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube.
So resignation is a last resort, when you're in the middle of a scandal hoping to escape the worst of it.
And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It all depends on what the scandal is, how the public sees it, and how well the politician handles the fallout.
Okay, I'm seeing a pattern here. Ambition and scandal, two sides of the same coin. But what happens after? These politicians who resign, do they just disappear?
That's where it gets really interesting. Because resignation isn't always the end. It can be the start of a comeback, a chance to rebrand yourself and come back stronger.
Wait, so it's not always game over? You can actually turn this whole resignation thing into a positive.
Absolutely. And that's where strategy meets perception and redemption. How do you get the public to forgive you, or at least forget? Because, political careers can be cyclical. You fall from grace, and then you find a way to climb back up.
Okay, you've got me hooked.
Yeah.
Give me some examples of these political comebacks, because if you're saying resignation can be a stepping stone to a second act,
Yeah.
that changes everything.
Think of it like this. Sometimes you have to step off the stage to rewrite your part in the play, and there are plenty of politicians who've done just that. Take Patrick Brown.
Okay, remind me about him.
He was the leader of Ontario's Progressive Conservative Party, but resigned back in 2018 because of sexual misconduct allegations. It was a huge scandal. His career seemed over.
But he came back.
He did. And he didn't try to hide anything or deny the allegations. He stepped down, stayed out of the public eye, fought the accusations in court, and then a few years later, he was back, running for mayor of Brampton.
And he won.
And he won.
That's pretty impressive. So it's not just about waiting for the scandal to go away. It's about using that time to change your image and show people you deserve a second chance.
Exactly. It's about showing resilience, learning from your mistakes, and a real desire to serve the public. It doesn't always work, but when it does, it shows how politics can come full circle.
It makes you wonder, though, what about the politicians who don't get a second chance? The ones whose resignations are seen as admitting guilt even if they say they're innocent.
That's a really good point. It shows how complicated public perception and forgiveness can be. Sometimes the resignation becomes the story overshadowing everything else.
So, like, resigning becomes the proof of wrongdoing, even if it's not true.
Exactly. It becomes the narrative that sticks in people's minds. And that's dangerous for politicians because once that happens, it's almost impossible to change.
So resignation can be a way to redeem yourself, but it can also be a trap. It all depends on how it's played by the politician and by the media.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the public, because in the end, it's the voters who decide whether to forgive, forget, or stay angry.
Okay, so we've got these different reasons behind resignation, ambition, scandal, redemption, but we haven't really talked about the process itself. Like, legally, what does it mean to resign from a political position?
That's a great question, and it can get pretty complicated. It's not just as simple as saying, I quit and walking away.
Oh, really? I thought it was pretty straightforward. You send a letter and pack up your desk and that's it.
In theory, yes. But in reality, there are all these legal details, precedents, even attempts to unresign that make the whole thing more complicated than you think.
Hold on. Unresign? Is that even possible?
It is, and it happens more often than you might imagine. But before we get to those stories, let's talk about the basics. First, there are different ways a resignation can be valid. Sometimes it's a formal written notice, like when Al Franken resigned from the Senate. Other times it can be implied by how someone acts, like if they just stop coming to work or publicly say they're leaving.
So it's not always about a piece of paper. It's about the actions and what's behind them. That makes sense, especially in a field where everyone is watching your every move.
Exactly. And to make things even more complicated, the courts have even decided what counts as a resignation in some cases. Like in 1999, Robert Torricelli, a senator from New Jersey, said he wouldn't run for re-election because of ethical problems. Basically, that was seen as a resignation, even though he never actually said he was resigning.
Wow, so even saying you won't run again can be enough. Talk about pressure. But you were going to tell me about those unresigned stories. Tell me more.
You want to hear about politicians trying to take back their resignation?
Absolutely. It sounds like pure political drama.
Okay, then get ready. We've got stories of awkward attempts, legal battles, and the audacity of trying to undo what's been done. Let's start with John Ashcroft. He was Missouri's attorney general, announced he was resigning to run for governor, but when his campaign started failing, he tried to take it back.
Oh, that's got to be awkward. Like, hey guys, just kidding. Can I have my old job back?
Yeah, it didn't work. Missouri law said once he submitted that resignation, it was final. No takebacks.
So in politics, choose your words carefully because they have consequences.
Exactly. And it's not just state-level stuff either. Sarah Palin resigned as Alaska's governor in 2009, blaming media scrutiny and investigations. But once that resignation was in, there was no going back.
I remember that. It was a big deal. So even someone as famous as a governor can't just undo a resignation.
Nope. The legal system wants things to be clear and stable, especially when it comes to positions of power. Once you resign, it creates a vacancy and the government keeps running.
Okay, but I'm still stuck on these attempts to unresign. You must have more stories.
Oh, there are plenty. One that always comes to mind is William J. Jefferson, a congressman from Louisiana. He got caught up in a bribery scandal and announced his resignation, but then some new evidence came out that he thought might clear his name, so he tried to delay the whole thing.
He wanted to put his resignation on hold. Bold move.
Right. But unfortunately for him, congressional rules are pretty clear. Once you start that resignation process, you can't just stop it because you changed your mind.
Wow, so even if you have a good reason like new evidence, you might still be stuck with your decision to resign.
That's the thing about legal processes. They often have a momentum of their own. It's like trying to stop a train that's already left the station.
I'm starting to see why they call this a paradox. Resignation seems so final, but there are all these gray areas and unexpected turns.
Exactly. And we're not even done yet. We've got cases like Andrew Cuomo, who resigned as New York's governor because of all those harassment allegations.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah.
But I remember there was a lot of talk about whether he might try to come back.
There was, but his resignation was pretty much set in stone. He announced it publicly, and that was that.
Okay, but you said pretty much set in stone. So there's still a tiny chance for someone in that situation.
Well, never say never, but it's very unlikely. Even Supreme Court justices have run into this issue. Justice Abe Forrest resigned in 1969 because of ethical concerns. Later on, he claimed he was pressured unfairly and even looked into getting his seat back.
Wait, a Supreme Court justice? I would have thought that's the ultimate no-take-backs position.
You'd think so, right? But it just shows how strong the desire for power and to get it back can be, even at the highest levels. Unfortunately for Fortas, once you resign from the Supreme Court, it's pretty much permanent. They don't just leave seats empty, you know.
So it's like a one-way door for most of these positions. Once you step through, you can't go back.
That's a good way to put it. And it really shows how important this decision is. Resignation is not something to take lightly. There are personal and professional consequences that can last for years.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. This whole resignation paradox isn't just a catchy phrase. It's a look into how power works and how complicated it is.
That's a great way to think about it. And as we've seen, there are all these different reasons and outcomes when it comes to resignation, ambition, scandal, redemption, and even just wanting to move on to something else. It's a really complex thing.
So where do we go from here? We've covered a lot, but I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this paradox.
You're right. There's still so much more to explore. Remember that case of Anthony Scaramucci you brought up?
Oh, the mooch. How could I forget?
His resignation was fascinating. He was Trump's communications director for like 10 days.
10 days. And he resigned.
Well, he announced his resignation, tried to spin it as a mutual decision, but it was pretty clear that he was forced out.
And this ties into the paradox how?
It shows that even in a crazy environment like the Trump administration, resignation still matters. It's a signal, a statement that can have big effects beyond the person involved.
I see. And you mentioned there were a few more examples from the articles that we haven't even talked about yet. Yeah, so the mooch, Anthony Scaramucci, fill me in.
Well, he was Trump's White House communications director.
Right, right. But wasn't it only for like a week or two?
10 days to be exact, which
Yeah.
is pretty short. But the most interesting part is that he announced his resignation, tried to say it was a mutual decision, but everyone knew he was pushed out.
So even in all that chaos, resignation still had power.
Exactly. And here's another example from the articles you sent over, J. Bennett Johnston. He was in the Louisiana State Senate, resigned to run for governor, lost that election, and then trying to get his old Senate seat back.
Oh, wow. So like a political boomerang. Did it work?
Nope. Louisiana law said he couldn't just take back the position. He had to run for re-election like everyone else.
Interesting. So you really can't just treat resignation like a revolving door. But, going through all these examples, it seems like we keep coming back to the same question. What does this all mean? What does the resignation paradox tell us about politics itself?
That's the million-dollar question, and there's no easy answer. But I think it comes down to this: resignation shows how our relationship with power is changing, both how it's used and how we see it.
What do you mean by changing relationship?
Well, think about it. In the past, resigning was like admitting defeat, a sign of weakness. But now it's often seen as a strategy, a way to control the story, or even come back stronger later.
So we're getting smarter about how politics works. We're realizing that stepping down isn't always giving up.
Exactly. And that change in how we see it is fascinating. It might mean we're more cynical about power now, more aware of what's really going on behind the scenes.
But it also means we're demanding more accountability, we're less tolerant of bad behavior, and we expect people in power to face the consequences.
And that's where resignation fits in. It's a way for politicians to show they're listening, that they understand the seriousness of the situation, and that they're willing to step down for the good of everyone.
Or maybe it's just a way to avoid more scrutiny and hope everyone forgets about the whole thing.
True. That could be it too. And that's what makes this paradox so interesting. It's a mix of motives, perceptions, and outcomes that's always changing.
So how do we as citizens make sense of it all? How do we figure out what's genuine and what's just strategy when it comes to these resignations?
I think the most important thing is to be informed, to know the history, the legal details, and the different ways resignation has been used over time.
And to think critically, to question what we're being told, to look beyond the headlines and consider why everyone is doing what they're doing.
Exactly. Because resignation is never just about leaving. It's a whole story, a drama with layers of meaning and characters who are all playing their parts.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. This has been an amazing conversation, and I feel like I've learned more about politics in the last hour than I have in years of watching the news.
Me too. And I hope our listeners feel the same way. Because in the end, understanding this paradox is about more than just figuring out political strategy. It's about understanding human nature, the desire for power, and the complex relationship between ambition, accountability, and redemption.
So to everyone listening, remember, resignation isn't always what it seems.
Yeah.
Keep asking questions, stay curious, and never underestimate the impact of a well-timed exit.
And until next time, keep diving deep.